Welcome to MD Longevity Lab, where we're playing the long game. This is a podcast where science meets real life, with expert insights, practical tips, and real-world tools to not only live longer, but live better. Our aim is to radically change the way medicine is practiced and enable individuals to age gracefully, maintaining health span and vitality well into their later years. We're your hosts, Dr. Nisha and Dr. Vikas Patel, physicians, partners in life, and parents balancing work, wellness, and everything in between. Let's dive in.
If you're over 40 and you've ever had a nagging injury, a pop, a tear, I'll just walk it off injury that turned into a 6-month problem or a 1-year problem, you are in very good company. This episode is for you guys.
Yeah, injury has been a part of the human experience since the very beginning. Every one of your ancestors going back 100,000 years got hurt. Right, a twisted ankle, chasing dinner, falling out of a tree, gathering fruit, blowing out a shoulder, throwing a spear. This is not new to the current generation. The difference is they didn't have the option to sit on a couch for 6 weeks. They basically kept moving because moving is what humans do, and their bodies healed, often extraordinarily well, because moving is part of the medicine, and somehow we seem to have forgotten it.
Yeah. And speaking of forgetting, we want to tell you what actually inspired this episode.
Do we?
I do.
Okay.
A few months ago, Vikas went out to play tennis with our kids' tennis coach, and he returned home limping, like meaning you couldn't even bear weight on one foot.
I could bear weight.
Barely.
It hurt. So I was probably about 50 minutes into playing, like properly warmed up and everything. And I quickly pushed off my left foot to run after a short ball and felt a pop and a pretty searing, excruciating pain in the bottom of my foot. And that was that.
Yeah. And that was your plantar fascia, right?
Correct. It was. In fairness to my body, honestly, it had been hurting for the past like 6 to 8 months. And I'd pretty much been playing through it, running through it, more or less ignoring it. And eventually, let me think, we were about to go on a ski trip, right?
Yeah. So you had a bad plantar fasciitis, which I'm sure many of you can relate to.
Yes. So we were going to go on a ski trip. And as soon as we got back, you had signed us up for a half marathon about 3 months later. So I was going to start training for that.
Yeah. And I surprised the way we do half marathons. I signed Vikas up and then I let him know, hey, we are doing this half marathon.
That's marriage. It's on my honey-do list.
Right. I was like, okay, I guess we're doing it.
So, we're doctors. Do as we say, not as we do. I decided the best course of action would be to stick a needle in my foot and inject some steroids into it.
And not like testosterone steroids. This is like prednisone, like corticosteroids.
Yeah, not methylprednisolone. Yeah, not like anabolic steroids. And it freaking hurt like hell for 3 days. I honestly, like in my interior monologue, though I would never have admitted to you in real time, this was such a mistake because my foot was on fire for like 3 days.
I was watching you inject and it was like a slow train wreck. I'm like, this is just, but we're so far in a marriage.
It very much hurt. Like getting your foot injected is not.
I know.
For the faint of heart.
We're at that point in marriage where like now we just let each other do dumb stuff and don't even say I told you so. We just think it. And so I just let you do dumb stuff.
You weren't even home when I did it.
What did you do in the office? Oh, that was PRP in your knee. All right. That's for another day.
That was different.
Anyway, there's no shortage of injuries in this house.
Then the steroids kicked in and it was awesome. I was completely pain-free. Like day 4, 5, 6, steroids kicked in. And then I was like, great for the ski trip. Mm-hmm. Started half marathon training. And yeah. Then there was that day that we played tennis, or I played tennis.
And then you felt a pop.
Pop.
Yep.
Actually, what had happened was I went for a 9-mile run. It was great for 8 miles.
Prior to tennis?
The week prior.
Okay.
Like I was at least a third of the way into marathon training, and foot got sore in the very last mile. I was good for 8 miles where I was almost home, and all of a sudden I started feeling all the same pain in my foot come back. Like literally we're on the downhill section coming back to our neighborhood when I started feeling pain. By the time I got home, full pain. Didn't do anything for 4 or 5 days, and then I had already scheduled this tennis to play. Went and played tennis, and
it was hurting before tennis.
It was hurting. I mean, how that week was hurting, and then pop.
Yep. So the steroids were not the answer that you were looking for.
Right. We're gonna get into that later in the podcast about what actually went wrong.
Well, this is happening everywhere. We have a dear friend who was at a wedding who decided to do the jump splits. You know who you are. And doing a slow, controlled split when you know you've done that in the past is different than throwing one out on the dance floor. And she literally tore her hamstring in two right off the bone. Like literally took 2 seconds.
Yeah, didn't tear the hamstring, tore it off the bone.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're in our 40s. We have plenty of friends. 40s, 50s. Injury is no surprise to any of us. We've all been there.
Yeah. Another friend recently playing soccer in the backyard with his son, and same thing. Took a wrong step, tore his Achilles right where it attaches to the calf. Incredibly painful injury. Incredibly long recovery. It's easier to tear your Achilles, but when you tear it at the insertion of the muscle, very difficult. It makes me like nauseated even thinking of that.
So painful. But we could go on and on about injuries. We could sit here for the next 4 hours and tell you our patient / friend / family member. And these stories are basically all the same. The rec league basketball player at age 42 whose knee gave out at a pickup game, the Masters runner whose IT band went at mile 10 of a half marathon, the pickleball convert who tweaked something that they cannot pronounce, and the mom who bent down or yawned incorrectly and threw out her back.
Welcome to the MD Longevity Lab podcast, where we're playing the long game.
I'm Dr. Nisha Patel.
And I am Dr. Vikas Patel, currently a 2-doctor household with 1 complete set of working plantar fascia.
Between the both of us.
Yep. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So today's episode is the I'm over 40 injury playbook. How to think about injury, how to not think about injury, and what to do when your body finally sends you the pop it's been threatening for months.
Yep. No fluff, no supplements or peptides to sell. No, just rest your muscle. We're just going to be giving you guys the science as usual.
So what are we going to cover here?
All right. So here's what we're doing in this episode, because everyone over 40 who moves is either currently injured, about to be injured, or just recovering from being injured. And if you're listening and you have no idea what that's like, chances are you are not 40. So if you're in your 20s rolling your eyes, we were once there too. Youth is wasted on the young. Stay tuned 20 more years and you'll be just like us. There's basically no fourth option. And the advice out there on what to do for injury prevention or what to do when you had an injury is a complete mess. Rest it, ice it, walk it off, get an MRI, don't lift, definitely lift, cortisone, PRP, of course, BPC 157, the Wolverine blend that supposedly heals everything. Whatever stretch TikTok is pushing this week, right? Meanwhile, the default advice, just rest it, is often exactly the wrong advice, especially for the tissue that most of us are actually injuring. So by the end of this episode, you're going to know why healing is way different after the age of 40, why moving is often the answer instead of the problem, and the 4-pillar playbook we use with ourselves and our patients. And this will piece together all the mainstream medical advice that has been quietly overturned by the science, even though nobody really sent the memo.
So, right, you said no fluff, no just rest it, just the science. So let's start with a question. Why is it that the same body that got you through your 20s and 30s without a whole lot of complaint, suddenly in your 40s is starting to fall apart? What is it that has actually changed?
And it's not just a you got older answer. That's the lazy version.
It's a lazy version and it's wrong because if it were just chronologic age, every 45-year-old would be equally injured. And they're not, right? So we know 60-year-olds who move like they're 40, and we know 40-year-olds who move like they're 70. The World Cup in soccer is just finished, and the oldest players were in their early 40s. For most Americans, what's happening is a specific cluster of things that really set the stage for injuries that they deal with in this midlife period. Let's walk through the 5 ingredients of midlife injury. This is really the mismatch on a smaller scale. Okay, one, sedentary weekdays. So the average American office worker spends like 9 to 11 hours a day basically sitting. And sitting is not a neutral activity for the musculoskeletal system. It actually shortens the hip flexors, it weakens the glutes. This has a name. It's a phenomenon called gluteal amnesia. And yes, that's an actual clinical term. It stiffens our thoracic spine. It weakens our deep core muscles. Sitting for a decade is essentially training your body to not do the things that it was evolved to do. So then all of a sudden, that was Monday through Friday. Saturday morning, you decide to sprint for a tennis ball. And unfortunately, it turns out you've been detraining for the movement that you actually want to do for years. And that one Saturday a week is not enough.
Gluteal amnesia. I love that. That's actually one of my favorite medical terms. It's like a Harry Potter, like Wingardium Leviosa.
It's a good one.
That's going to be my stage name one day. Gluteal amnesia.
Yes. Literally, your body forgets that your butt exists.
No, then that's not a good stage name. It's like the opposite of a good stage name. Anyway.
All right, number 2. So the weekend warrior pattern. Most over 40 recreational athletes do not train consistently. They train episodically. Sedentary movement Monday through Friday, as we discussed, then 2 hours of high intensity activity on Saturday, 0 activity on Sunday. This is kind of the worst possible loading pattern for connective tissue. Tendons and ligaments do not respond well to sudden, intermittent, high intensity load. They respond really well to consistent, progressive load. So a 45-year-old who works out 3 times a week for 45 minutes is at a dramatically lower injury risk than one who does 1 3-hour hard session on the weekend. It's literally the same total volume, but it's radically different outcomes, really radically different injury outcomes.
Number 3, improper strength training. And this is a big one. Most weekend warriors are doing their sport, right? Pickleball, tennis, running, softball, without any structured strength workout underneath it, which means the muscles that should be supporting the joints and pulling on those tendons are undertrained for the demand that they're putting in during those weekend warrior sports. So the sport becomes the training, and the sport is not actually a good training program. It doesn't build the specific stabilizers that you need. It just loads the ones that you already have, which are usually not enough and lead to injury.
You're exactly right. Like, why don't kids have to worry about this as much? It's because when kids are young, they're constantly moving in very dynamic patterns. Like, just watch kids on a playground. They're constantly doing activity, loading their skeleton in different ways on a daily basis, while as adults, we will do it once a week when our paddle team is playing another paddle team, right?
Mhm.
All right, so number 4, poor mechanics. Nobody really teaches adults how to move. We learn how to squat, hinge, jump, and land as kids. And then we go to work a desk job or basically any job that does not involve constant physical activity. And then nobody is actually checking whether we still remember how to do correct movement patterns when we get back into physical activity. So the 45-year-old that is, you know, planting a foot to change direction on a tennis court is using a movement pattern that hasn't been coached, corrected, or reinforced since about age 14 or 16. And under the load of adult intensity, faulty mechanics, and overall more weight because we get bigger, it's basically just an injury that's waiting to happen.
Yep. Number 5, under recovery. Poor sleep, high stress, and 2 glasses of wine a night for some people, and sometimes more. Not enough protein. All the things that were survivable at age 25 are now the difference between healing and not healing. Do you remember when we were in our 20s? Like, we could do anything. We could be hungover, work out, and be totally fine, right?
Yeah, that sleep quality as a kid is like,
Yeah. You could have no sleep and just like work
I think
out.
like if I could have a superpower, that would be it. To be able to like have the same kind of sleep that I used to have.
Oh, good sleep. It is much harder to come by for sure. But recovery is a resource, and most people over 40 are running a recovery deficit, and they're doing that chronically.
So the honest answer to why am I getting hurt so much lately is not really you got old. It's you got sedentary, you got episodic, you detrained, your mechanics decayed, and you stopped recovering.
Yep, all at the same time. And it happens so slowly that you didn't even notice, which is why the injury feels like it came out of nowhere. But actually, your injury didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of decades of small compromises. And we've all been there.
Great. Really excited about that.
I know. Can't wait for our future.
So there is some good news. Every single one of these 5 things is basically reversible. You can actually get your body to find your glutes again and get rid of the gluteal amnesia. You can distribute your load across the week instead of, blowing yourself up just on Saturday. You can add 3 strength sessions a week for 30, 35 minutes. You can get coached so that you have proper form. You can protect your sleep. None of this actually requires a new body. It just really requires a new plan with foresight.
Now, the tissue that pays a price when all 5 of these things are running is almost always the same. The injuries that sideline the over 40 weekend warrior are almost never bone. They're almost never muscle in the way that people traditionally think. What's actually taking us out over and over in every ER and orthopedic clinic in this country is mostly tendon, ligament, and connective tissue injuries, right? You've heard of ACL tears and Achilles tendon ruptures, plantar fascia, Achilles, rotator cuffs, patellar tendon in your knee, tennis elbow. I know I've had that. And I promise you, the vast majority of people who have it have never held a tennis racket, but I've held a tennis racket. I just never took proper lessons. So I basically was practicing wrong my whole life. And then I learned the correct way. So had I learned this way, I'd probably be at Wimbledon right now. But that's for another day
I
too.
love your confidence.
I miss my window. But golfer's elbow too, that's the medial version of the tendonitis, your gluteal tendon, proximal hamstring, IT bands. The pattern is so consistent that it's basically diagnostic. So if you're over 40 and something hurts when you move it, chances are it's probably a tendon.
Love that for us.
Mhm.
And really the healing is brutal. Muscles actually heal pretty quickly. So muscles will heal in weeks. Bone, right, 6 to 8 weeks to heal. Tendon, unfortunately, it's like months to years. And that's only if you're correctly loading it. So this is kind of why this occurs. Tendons have almost no innate blood supply. It's what we call avascular tissue, which means it heals slowly under the best of conditions and dramatically more slowly as we age. Tendon vascularity decreases with every passing decade collagen turnover is measured in months to years, not in days. The tissue that heals the slowest in the body is also the tissue that ages the worst.
Yeah. So our tendons basically are the retired uncle of our tissues. They're slow, they're cranky, and they don't return your calls.
Exactly.
Sometimes I'm excited they don't return our calls.
So here's kind of the evolutionary punchline that reframes this. Every one of those tissues that we just named was calibrated for a very different life than the one that most of us are living, right? Your Achilles evolved to be able to sprint after prey. Your rotator cuff evolved to be able to throw spears and climb trees. Your patellar tendon evolved to squat over and over and over repeatedly all day. It required your patellar tendon allowed us to get down on the ground, gather food, tend fires, and stand back up repeatedly. Your plantar fascia evolved to be able to walk 15 miles a day on uneven ground, barefoot, on grass, dirt, rock, and then intermittently sprint. What sits between all of these tissues and modern life is roughly really like 2 generations of chairs, cars, and cushioned shoes. Your tendons really aren't broken. They're just calibrated for a different job than what we are asking them to do until suddenly on Saturday morning you decide to play tennis. And then they don't really know how to say yes because they have been detrained.
Yep. So you're not injured because you got old. Your tendons are just slower now, and they're being asked to do something they've been underprepared for since like 1960.
Okay, so let me stay in that evolutionary lens for a second because this is where the medical advice that a lot of us grew up with collides with the biology of tissue. For 99% of human history, the injured hunter-gatherer had basically 2 options, right? They either keep moving or they die. There wasn't any couch, there was no orthopedist, there's no 6 weeks of non-weight bearing prescription. There was the tribe moving to the next water source, and either you moved with them or you got left behind. The human body evolved within that reality. It didn't really evolve to a we're taking a break to heal mode. It evolved to heal under load.
Yes. So the couch, right, or ergonomic chairs, this is a modern invention.
The couch is definitely a modern invention. And so is the medical advice that goes with it. Because when you look at the biology, the body evolved to heal under load, not just as a nice to have, but as a fundamental requirement. Bone remodels along lines of stress. Wolff's Law, which was first described in 1892, basically says tendons organize their collagen fibers along the direction of pull, meaning if you don't load a healing tendon, the collagen literally lays down in random directions and the tissue heals weaker than how it was initially. Cartilage requires cyclic compression in order for it to survive. It has no blood supply of its own, and it gets its nutrient really from the fluid movement that's generated by loading it. Muscle fibers orientation is determined by mechanical demand. None of these tissues heal correctly in the absence of load. They heal malformed in the absence of load, and that is really by design.
Which means the well meaning medical advice telling you not to weight bear at all for 6 weeks may actually be prescribing a worse outcome than the one that your body would produce if it was left alone. And that doesn't mean when we say load that you're like deadlifting 100 pounds or squatting 100 pounds if you're injured. It just means sitting on a couch. Fast forward 6 weeks, you're going to be in the same place, if not worse.
In many cases, the modern medicine kind of paradigm has shifted significantly. We've walked back a lot of the common advice, medical advice over the past 20 years. And there's kind of 3 specific areas that we should get into about that. One is the prolonged bed rest. So for most of the 20th century, this was really the standard of care for a huge range of conditions. For weeks after a back surgery, for a month after a heart attack, 6 weeks after childbirth, right? You were supposed to be bed rest. That has completely gone in the age of evidence-based medicine now. We now say that prolonged bed rest causes muscle wasting, deconditioning, blood clots, and worse outcomes across every metric that we can basically measure. The literature changed, yet I don't know that every doctor has gotten the memo for that.
Yeah, it used to be knee replacements, like you were in bed for 6 weeks, and now they have you up pretty much the same day within 24 hours after a knee replacement. All right, number 2, and this is the biggest one for the over 40 weekend warrior. Just rest it for tendinopathy. This is where the science has done a complete 180. In 1998, a Swedish researcher named Alfredson published a protocol using heavy eccentric loading for Achilles tendinopathy specifically, meaning you take the tendon that hurts and you deliberately, progressively load it into pain 3 times a week in a controlled environment. The outcomes were night and day and way better than just rest alone. That was almost 30 years ago. And since then, similar protocols have been developed for the patellar tendon in our knee, the rotator cuff in our shoulder, tennis elbow, gluteal tendons, and plantar fascia. Load is the actual medicine, and rest can sometimes manifest as disease. This is not fringe. This is literally the standard of care in sports medicine.
I think that's like a game changer in proper healing now. And this is also how we see like all these professional athletes make recoveries relatively quickly. We now know how to get them to recover by properly loading their connective tissue in order for them to organize the healing collagen fibers correctly. All right, number 3 I'm going to cover because I am the poster child. Cortisone as a fix-all, right? So it's genuinely useful in acute settings, in some acute settings. As I stated earlier, I have injected my own foot, but I've also injected my own elbow. Have I done
Yeah.
my knees? No. Okay. So, but it's honestly, it's broadly overused for chronic tendon and connective tissue problems where it masks pain. Unfortunately, it also ends up weakening the connective tissue over time. And this increases the rupture risk. So cortisone does not actually do anything to heal. All it does is quiet the alarm. And an alarm that you can't hear is basically pain that's disappeared without proper rehab and loading, right? After steroids, you risk rupturing your plantar fascia. For instance, I've heard.
You just did that to kind of prove for this episode, right? Just as a case study.
Like, like I think we pride ourselves on this podcast to keep it real, right? Like I am, this, I very much do not like to take time off. And I don't like to have to compromise the things that I enjoy doing. And that's what an injury to me is like, oh man, like now I'm not going to be able to go do the thing that I want to do. And I thought that I was rehabbing well enough, slow enough, but I really wasn't. Like there was no reason really like in my training protocol for running for that half marathon, I was only supposed to do a 7-mile run that day.
And you
And
pushed it.
instead, I was like, I'm feeling good. I'm going to do a 9-mile run today. And had I just stopped at 7, I probably never would have injured my plantar fascia to then get a rupture the following week.
It happens. We're both like that. And I think we've learned to listen to our body, and listen to our body does not mean sit on your butt and don't exercise. It means we have to train and tend to those tendons properly, which we're now doing. Motion is medicine, right? Rest is the disease. For tendons, that load is that therapy. It's not radical anymore, right? This is the evidence.
And that evolutionary framing makes it so obvious, it's almost embarrassing. Of course, the body heals under load. That's the only environment it ever had up until about 70 years ago.
All right. So let's move into the injury playbook, right? injury prevention playbook, the 4 pillars. It's the same architecture as our muscle and bone episodes. And this is what you actually do when the injury happens. Pillar number 1, why don't you take it?
Pillar number 1, don't stop moving, right? And this is really where 90% of people go wrong on day 1. The concept I want everyone to really kind of walk away with is relative rest as opposed to absolute rest. So relative rest means you stop the specific movement that's hurting you, but you don't stop moving. If you obviously are in so much pain that you can't get off the couch, you need to get on the couch, stay there until the pain has gotten bearable. But then you need to start moving, right? This is not to say that in the absolute acute phase, the first 24, 48 hours, 72 hours, that if you need to rest because you're in so much discomfort, you need to rest. Listen to your body. But once the pain is bearable again, you need to start moving. If your ankle is hurt, your upper body is not, right? If your shoulder is hurt, your legs are not hurt. If your plantar fascia is torn, your quads are not. Your back is not. Your arms are not. Your entire cardiovascular system is still fine. All of those things are still ready to work, and they're just waiting for you to do something.
Right. In other words, quote unquote, I'm hurt or I'm injured. It's not a full body diagnosis, and we should stop treating it as such.
Not even close, right? And this is kind of what I did once I tore my plantar fascia. I kept lifting. I don't really enjoy cycling, but I did cycle. I kept walking. No explosive push-ups at all. No tennis. No running for 3 months. I did seated presses, upper body pulls, single leg work, core work, everything I could do that did not involve seriously loading that injured tissue. And the rule I basically gave myself is I still need to do something every day. It doesn't have to be intense, but it does have to be something deliberate, right? Like we had talked about going to Japan in a previous episode. Like we walked 20,000 steps a day while I was still recovering from my plantar fascia. Was it sore? Yes. Was it fast, explosive movement? No. We were still moving the entire time.
Yeah, movement is a promise that you make to your body that says, I still need to preserve this joint. Please don't dismantle it. So we get it. We've had injuries, and I'm sure you guys have too. But just remember, if one part of your body is injured, that means the other 95% is still intact. And you've got to remember that.
So your body kind of has like 2 settings, and your body's pretty blunt about those 2 settings. It doesn't have a setting of we're rehabilitating. It basically just has we're using this or we're not using this. And when you completely rest, you truly stop. You're stopping all of the signaling cascade. And you're basically just saying, I'm being careful. I'm not using anything and I don't need this. You're signaling, I do not need this anymore to your body. And the body, which has been calibrated over millions of years of famine, scarcity, sometimes immobility, right? It responds to that exact signal the way that evolution taught it to. It dismantles what it thinks you don't need. When you say, I'm not doing anything, your body says, okay, let me dismantle stuff. This is the precise pattern of deconditioning, and it happens shockingly fast, right? There's measurable strength loss within 7 to 10 days of the immobilization. Bone density drops within weeks. VO2 max really drops within days. The hunter-gatherer who stopped moving did not get rested. They just got smaller, weaker, and eventually died.
Which means your Netflix marathon is being read by your body as ancestral famine, pretty much.
Totally. Your body can't tell the difference between we're dying in a cave and we are binge watching The Bear.
I know. I want to see. We have so many Netflix shows to get to.
We have a lot of Netflix shows to cover.
Yeah. So the gym is not the enemy of your recovery. Netflix is, pretty much.
That's right. All right. So pillar 2 is really kind of the raw materials of recovery. protein, that's number one. And let's be a little bit careful here because of the internet and all. There's a lot of injury recovery marketing, and a lot of it has gotten this whole process wrong. The most important thing you can do nutritionally during recovery is not buy a fancy collagen powder peptide or injected peptide. It is to hit an elevated total body protein target with high quality complete proteins. So that means proteins that are going to give you all 9 of those essential amino acids. Um, those are things that our body can't make, and we have to get from food, right? So if you're getting those things from eggs, dairy, meat, fish, poultry, whey protein, which is a dairy protein, soy, these are the tissue repair raw materials that actually matter.
And why? It's because healing requires collagen synthesis, muscle protein synthesis, immune function, and inflammatory resolution. And every one of those processes in the body requires a broad amino acid pool that your body has to source from those complete high quality dietary protein. This is not a commentary on vegetarian versus non vegetarian, but a lot of those meat products, those are the ones with all of those amino acids that we require. Isolated collagen powder is missing several of the essential amino acids, and it does not, despite all the marketing, reliably get preferentially routed to your injured tendon. So I've seen advertisements like eat this, collagen supplement, and it literally goes right to that injured tendon, and it doesn't work that way. Your body breaks it down like any other protein and uses those amino acids wherever it needs them.
So the number one rule of the injured pantry is pretty boring. Eat real protein. Targets during that recovery phase are really like 1.8 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day in protein. That's high, right? But it's actually what we would recommend because your body is trying to heal injured tissue. So that's up from the FDA guideline of 1.6 right now, which is for just regular healthy adults. This is like I'm training, and if I'm training, recovering, I need to have a higher amount of total protein. So for a 75 kilogram person, that's roughly 135 to 165 grams of protein, right? 75 kilograms, about 160 pounds or so. If you distribute that across 3 or 4 meals, that's 30 to 40 grams per meal. If you're not tracking, most people are shocked to find that they're basically usually eating about a half of the amount of protein that we would typically recommend for somebody who's injured.
I had a patient the other day and we got to talking. So they're on a GLP-1 and ordering the BP157 peptide from some random website, definitely made in China. And we talked about, okay, well, you're injured. What's your protein intake like? So this person's not working out, and protein, they're getting about 40 grams and they're 150 pounds. I'm like, save your money. Like the BP157 isn't doing anything. It's that foundation first that most people skip over, and they think this supplement or peptide is going to fix it.
And they're on a GLP, so they're operating in a caloric deficit, right?
Yeah.
They're in the phase of losing weight, so they're in a caloric deficit. They're not eating enough protein, and they're injured, and they're wondering, why can't I recover? Why is my knee pain not getting better? It's because you're not fueling for recovery properly.
Yep. And then let's touch on the one micronutrient that genuinely matters. That's vitamin C, because vitamin C is a required cofactor for collagen synthesis. It literally can't happen without vitamin C. And this is why scurvy, which we don't really see a whole lot of, vitamin C deficiency, it causes catastrophic connective tissue failures. The old time sailors, right, falling apart on ships, were watching their gums bleed and their tendons unravel because they had no vitamin C to build collagen with, right? They were like,
thank you, Mrs. Warner. She was my social studies teacher in, like, I don't know, 7th grade or something, who taught me about the British lineman, right? They were
Oh,
called
yeah.
linemen because they would take barrels of lime
Lime.
um, with them across the sea to America so that their teeth didn't fall out because they needed vitamin C to prevent scurvy.
That's nice that you remember that.
I
I
remember.
love that. I remember the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria. I don't know who taught me that, but thanks. Thanks to all our teachers. We love you.
So, most people are not deficient in vitamin C, but during recovery, I think you do want to be at the top end of the healthy range, not at the bottom. So, citrus, fruits, bell peppers, kiwis, strawberries, broccoli, um, or a modest supplement. You need about 500 milligrams a day, which is more than enough. Mega dosing does not help. Adequate is the goal.
Yep. So protein floor high, complete sources of protein, like we talked about. Vitamin C should be on board, hopefully in the form of fruits and vegetables. And if not, a supplement. What about all the collagen stuff that we see on TikTok and Instagram? We get asked about all the time.
So the honest answer here is collagen or gelatin taken with vitamin C 30 to 60 minutes before a loading session does actually have some evidence. There's a study Shaw et al. Published in 2017. They showed a modest boost in tendon collagen synthesis with exercise, but you have to notice the specifics. It's timed, it's paired with vitamin C, it's used around loading, not as a substitute for loading. And the real effect was modest, real, but modest. So if you want to add collagen or gelatin to your protocol, that's totally fine. It won't hurt, and there's a plausible benefit to it, but it's definitely not the staple of recovery. It's kind of the garnish. The plate is the total protein intake. The plate is having enough adequate vitamin C. The plate is having enough calories to support recovery.
So I can stop feeling guilty about not inhaling bone broth every night because it's disgusting. I can't do it.
You can. Bone broth is nice, but it's not the medicine. The medicine is kind of the whole foods, right? Eggs, chicken, fish, dairy, soy, quinoa. These are all things to hit the number that we need.
All right, let's move on to pillar number 3.
Pillar 3 is sleep and recovery. We touched on that earlier. This sounds obvious, but nobody really discusses it when it comes to injury management. Tissue repair actually happens at night. So that's when your growth hormone pulses, that's when testosterone repletion occurs, that is when inflammatory cytokines get cleared. 6 hours of sleep is a broken construction crew. 8 hours is a full crew. And the injured over 40 athlete does not need baseline sleep. They need more than baseline. This is a period of elevated repair demand. Your body is asking for more raw material and more time on the clock to actually do the fixing.
But of course, in reality, what actually happens is people sleep worse when they're injured, right? They have pain. They take medications. They have anxiety about the injury, frustration, and sitting around too much during the day so they're not tired at night. And that's why we say you got to keep moving. If your arm is injured, that doesn't mean you can't get your 10,000 steps in a day because really, when we exercise, we're also fatiguing ourselves and it makes it way easier to fall asleep.
Exactly what you said. All of that. And alcohol, I gotta say this, should get aggressively dialed down during recovery. Alcohol suppresses growth hormone. It disrupts sleep architecture, which means even though you may feel like you're sleeping, it has lowered the quality of your sleep. It blunts muscle protein synthesis. It increases inflammation. Every single one of those things is working against tissue repair when you're trying to heal. And, from an evolutionary side, because this hits home for me, our ancestors slept with the sun, right? So they had this one built in advantage that you and I are never going to have. When they got hurt, the entire tribe slowed down slightly to accommodate. There was no log back in for an 8 a.m. meeting. Their environment basically cooperated with their recovery, while I think ours is actively fighting against it, right? Blue light after dark, alarm clocks. We're going to drink caffeine at 4 p.m. to be able to stay up. Cortisol spiking because of every notification that goes off on our phone. The modern injured 45-year-old is sleeping in the worst possible environment for tissue repair, and then like honestly wonders why it's taking forever to recover.
Yeah, you can't heal from an injury during the day. You heal at night. And if you're sleeping only 6 hours, you're not healing. You're just waiting and probably going to get re injured again.
Yeah, I think people don't realize this. Like I literally, my last shift in the ER, someone asked me like they were sick, they had basically like a viral illness, and they're like, I'm okay during the daytime. Like I don't feel great, but like in the evening and night, I spike these fevers. I completely drench my bed. And then during the daytime, I'm usually okay. I don't have a fever. Well, that's your body's inflammatory process in fighting off the infection. It occurs at night when you're sleeping. When you're resting is when you will spike the fever. That is when your body is trying to do the repair. And it's no different for injuries.
All right, let's move on to pillar number 4, the last one.
So, how to actually rehab a tendon, right? This is what I think, unfortunately, gets so messed up in the conversation. So, the playbook that we really need to follow here is outside of the protein, the sleep, um, and modifying our activity. It's really about how to load tendons correctly, how to promote that healing process, and how do we actually do that? There is a specific method that has been backed by decades of sports medicine research, and it basically comes in 2 stages.
And the hard part is it's not a pill, a supplement, or a peptide you can inject. It's kind of like homework for your tendons, right? You just have to commit to it and do it a couple times a week. So, stage 1 of that is isometric loading. In the earlier phase of recovery, when you're first injured and when that tendon is still angry, inflamed, and painful and reactive, like I know my biceps tendon when I was doing pull ups, like it was, I was definitely feeling it even at night or when I would wake up in the morning. That's when you don't want to go straight to dynamic weight bearing exercises. You want to start with something we call isometrics. An isometric is a contraction of the muscle where the joint doesn't move. You're just holding that position under load. For an Achilles injury, that might be a static heel raise for 30 to 45 seconds. So you're just holding it. You're like for my biceps tendon, I'm not, bending my elbow. I'm just holding it in that steady position flexed for 30 to
Right.
45
So,
seconds.
Nisha had proximal biceps tendonitis, which is a pretty common reason for getting anterior front shoulder pain. And instead of doing curls where you're actually asking for dynamic movement, right? This is just, I'm going to hold a weight, 10 pounds, 15 pounds, and hold your arm in a half contracted position for 30 to 45 seconds. It's going to not exacerbate the pain quite as much as doing full movement. And oftentimes it ends up reducing pain acutely when doing the full movement would actually exacerbate the pain.
I mean, I'll be honest, I definitely pushed past the point where I should have stopped. So for me, I couldn't even hold a 5-pound weight flex. I was literally doing just body weights for 1 week, and then I moved to a 5-pound weight. So I think even if you're doing that isometric loading without weight and just contracting the muscle, if you have to start there and then move to a little more weight, that is perfectly fine too.
Yeah, so for a bad patellar tendon in your knee, you can do wall sits. For rotator cuff, you can do isometric external rotation, being held against a wall. For tennis elbow, you can do static grip on a dumbbell held for 30 seconds. For plantar fascia, which I am well versed in now, basically an isometric toe raise held at the top, or sorry, heel raise where I'm held up at the top. Why is it that isometrics help?
Well, two reasons. First, they reduce pain. So there's genuinely good evidence that isometric holds of about 30 to 45 seconds, 5 sets. These dampen the pain signal from an injured tendon for hours afterwards. And I was so surprised. Like I had biceps tendonitis for almost a year, right? And within a matter of a week or 2 weeks of doing these isometric exercises, the pain started to subside. Second, they load the tendon safely enough to send the signal that says this tissue is being used, please repair it, without the joint motion that might aggravate the injury. It's the smallest possible dose of please don't dismantle me language that you can give the tendon while it's still angry. You brought it, this is before we were recording. I want you to touch on why we need to do the isometrics and not curls and the pace of muscle and tendon growth.
Muscle growth happens much quicker than connective tissue growth does. So this is why, like, you'll hear about these bodybuilders that tear a pec muscle, right? I remember when I was a kid, Sylvester Stallone, who at the time was actually taking steroids, right? He got into a pissing match with somebody else at the gym, and they were benching and tore his pec. And it basically happened because the muscle is strong enough. Like the muscle adapts very quickly, right? You work out hard, you wake up the next day sore, and within 2 days, the soreness has subsided and you're actually stronger and able to lift more weight. Connective tissue does not heal like that. It does not adapt like that. It takes months to years for the adaptation to occur, to keep up pace with what the muscle is able to do in a very short amount of time. And so that mismatch is really what causes injury to even occur. It's why we tear ACLs, why we tear Achilles tendons, why we develop rotator cuff injuries. Rotator cuff injuries are not muscle injuries, they're tendon injuries. It's where the tendons are actually inserting into the bone, and it's tendon injury that's actually causing the problem. So those tendons don't have the same blood supply, which is why they can't repair and grow as quick as the muscles do. Muscles have huge blood supply.
Yeah, I love that. You taught me something new. All right, stage 2, progressive resistance through range of motion. So once that acute pain is manageable, for some of you, it might take, like, honestly, for me, it took a week. After having 9 months of pain, I was like, you're bullshitting me. There's no way that this is going to work because I've been in pain for 9 months. Within a week, that was the first time I had been pain free. But so once that pain is manageable, it could be a week, it could be a few weeks in, you move into slow, controlled, loaded range of motion work. And this is where the actual rebuild happens. You take that tendon through its full or near full range under progressive load, controlling the eccentric portion, the lengthening phase, slowly and deliberately. So it's like a reverse curl slow.
Yeah,
Right?
so eccentric, I think we'd use that term earlier and we didn't define it. So eccentric is when you're lengthening out the muscle. We typically think of when we're exercising, we're trying to manage the contraction, right? We're pulling something towards us with our biceps, or if we're trying to do push-ups, we're using our pecs and our triceps. We're contracting our pecs and our triceps to push away from us, right? That is the opposite. What we want to do is lengthening out the muscle slowly under load. And if you're doing that, it's providing some of that recovery stimulus.
Yeah. For the Achilles tendon, that heel drops off a step, right? Slow on the way down, loaded. You can do it with a backpack or a dumbbell as you progress. And that's a protocol we mentioned earlier, 3 sets of 15 twice a day with progressively heavier load, adding into pain about 5 out of 10, like, it will hurt a little bit, right? But it's not gonna be that pang of pain that
You don't want to exceed 5 out of 10 pain in the tendon because then you're loading it too much.
okay.
So the idea is basically you're still doing both concentric and eccentric, but the goal, what most people do is we focus on the concentric part and then we go very rapidly with the eccentric part, right? What we really want to do is equal times for the concentric and the eccentric. So if I'm doing a curl because I have biceps tendonitis and I slowly bring the curl up over 2 seconds or 3 seconds, I want to slowly bring it down over the exact same period of time rather than what typically is done, which is bring it up and then just drop it. Bring it up fast, drop it fast. That's not what we want. Usually concentric is a little bit slower than the down. And what we want is equal, and we want to lengthen both of those out slowly because that will allow the collagen to organize in the in the in the direction of load, which is what we really want. So we talked about the heel, right, for Achilles. For a bad patellar tendon in your knee, right, it's heavy, slow resistance, leg extensions, and slow tempo squats, 3 to 4 seconds down, 3 to 4 seconds up, progressing the weight over time. For rotator cuff, banded external rotations, right, moving your arm out is external rotation, and controlled overhead work with very light weight, progressing weekly with slightly more resistance. Tennis elbow, right? I don't even play tennis with my left arm, and I got a little bit of tennis elbow in my left arm. Eccentric extensor drops with very light dumbbells, 20 reps, slow eccentric, up with a good hand, down with the injured one. For plantar fascia, heavy, slow calf raises off of a step with a towel scrunched under the toes, just so that you get a little bit of bias onto the fascia. 3 sets of 12, 3 times a week, load progressive with a dumbbell as tolerated.
Yeah, so the reality of tendon rehab, which is pretty much all injury rehab over the age of 40, is, these exercises are weirdly boring and repetitive on paper, and they're being done really slowly. I mean, that just makes it sometimes excruciatingly boring. And it's nothing like the sport that got you here, so it doesn't feel like much, but this is exactly how you're going to get back to that sport, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, and this is why they work. Exactly why they work. The sport asks a tendon to do things fast, reactive, high force movements that it just cannot handle in an injured state. The rehab asks it to do it slow, controlled, and these progressively loaded movements that lay down the organized collagen along the correct lines of stress, along the lines of Wolff's law for tendons.
Yeah, two other quick principles. First, pain to about 4 out of 5 out of 10. So you don't want to exceed that 5 out of 10 during the exercise. That's acceptable as long as it settles back to baseline within 24 hours. If it's still worse the next morning, you may have loaded it too heavy. So scale back off of that. This is the counterintuitive rule people get wrong most often. Some pain is fine, right? Increasing pain over 24 hours in that tendon is the signal to back off. It's not the pain during the exercise itself. And I want to differentiate that because this isn't muscle pain. We've all had that good sore from muscles, right? And like you said, muscles recover way quicker in 2 days. It's those tendons, ligaments. I mean, those take months.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing this right now. I haven't run in 3 or 4 months now, and my foot is just now down to maybe a 2 or 3 out of 10 in pain. And this week is the first time I'm going to go for a run again, mostly because, well, I like to stay in shape, but uh, our son is wanting to run a half marathon in the fall, and I would like to try and do it with him.
Yeah, he keeps us honest and motivated. So I think it's nice that they're kind of entering their teen years and it forces us to keep up with them.
Yeah. So my personal goal is if I'm starting it at 2 or 3, I finish at a 5 out of 10. And the next day, I should be back down to a 2 or 3. We'll see. We'll let you know how it goes. All right. Number 2. This is kind of where pillar 4 connects to the larger joint scaffolding. You have to strengthen all of the joints, muscles that that support that tendon. So basically, the tendon doesn't fail in isolation. It also fails because the surrounding musculature is under supporting it oftentimes. So for the plantar fascia, you have to strengthen the calves. You have to strengthen the entire posterior chain, the hip adductors. You do single leg balance work. The Achilles, it's the same, right? Plus hip stabilizers, patellar tendon. You got to do quads and glutes. If you're looking at, and hamstrings, if you're looking at the rotator cuff, you got to do the cuff itself. You have to do the scapula stabilizers. You have to do thoracic mobility. Tennis elbow, you got to do all of the forearm muscles, the forearm eccentrics. You have to be able to do grip strength. You have to be able to do rotator cuff exercises and thoracic mobility. It's always doing everything in the region, not just that one tendon in isolation.
Yeah. So the actual injury rehab is not just working on the exact injured spot, it's rebuilding the whole neighborhood around it. I think I learned that firsthand too with my hip arthritis.
Yes.
You were like, if you want to take load off of a weakened joint, which I have autoimmune hip arthritis, it's a genetic condition that I can't control. You taught me, like, you've got to put some muscle around there to take the stress off the joint.
There's a great ad about ankylosing spondylitis, right? You've heard it.
No.
It's like this it's like this angry cloud animation that they show, and basically it's like, I'm ankylosing spondylitis.
That's kind of like me every day. But
it was before you started deadlifting.
It's still me every day, but I'm cranky for different reasons. But no, since I've put on muscle and loaded that joint correctly, I have been pain-free, knock on wood.
So definitely have to train the whole neighborhood. When the whole neighborhood is strong, the injured tissue is much better protected. And this is really what a good physical therapist does. A good PT assesses which of the surrounding muscles are under supporting a joint, and then they prescribe isometrics for pain control, and then progressively they add load to range of motion work. Physical therapy done well is exactly this protocol.
Yeah. Physical therapy done poorly is 10 reps of a stretchy band and a dry needling appointment.
I'm not bad mouthing dry needling.
It has its uses,
but it's mostly for pain relief. It's not for rehab.
Yeah. So yeah, it definitely improves pain. And obviously it's better than opiates and some of the other pain control, pain management stuff, but it's not a substitute for tendon rehab.
Correct. A tendon injury is a message. Basically, it's saying this tissue is asked to do more than the muscles around it could support. The playbook isn't to protect just the tendon. It's to load it correctly, progressively, and strengthen everything around it so that it never has to work overtime again.
All right. So we covered what works. Now let's quickly go through what doesn't work. And we're going to do some quick myth busting. The same rhythm as our other episodes, kind of high yield. So listen up.
Complete rest, covered in segment 4. But I want to say one more time because it's the single most common mistake. Rest the specific movement, not the whole body, not for weeks. The couch is not medicine.
Number 2, the Googled MRI. Every MRI in a person over the age of 40 has findings. Let me repeat that. Our MRI is not going to be normal in any of our joints. Herniated discs on imaging in an asymptomatic 40-year-old are pretty common, really. Rotator cuff tears in people who have no symptoms, also very common. The image is not the injury. And the image is not a photograph of the body that is being used currently. It's literally just a snapshot. So don't let a radiology report scare you into inaction. Like all of a sudden, I have this rotator cuff and I can't use my rotator cuff tear. If you're pain free, that doesn't mean you can't use your shoulder anymore.
Exactly. Like the number of people who come to the ER asking for imaging studies when there's literally like they can still move their joint, they just have pain. And I'm like, you're going to have to do rehab. Your MRI is basically not going to be super helpful in this because I can already tell you most likely which tendon is injured. And this is the rehab protocol. But most people still want the MRI to confirm for themselves that it's okay to not do anything.
Our deductible sucks. And to me, an MRI is just a very expensive way to confirm what you already know.
What the physician usually knows, the patient maybe not. All right, cortisone. It's a shortcut. Sometimes appropriate, most of the time, not most of the time, often overused. It's not a substitute for addressing the mechanical issue. If you get an injection, it buys you time to start doing the proper rehab, but it should not replace the rehab. And you got to be very careful because the pain goes away very quickly. And then you don't know if you're doing something improperly, like me.
Yeah. But the number of patients that we have, oh, yeah, I just get a steroid injection in my back every 3 months. Well, what else are you doing? Nothing. Well, that's also not fixing the problem. It's just kind of masking that alarm.
Vast majority of people.
Yep. All right. Let's go through the next one. Getting a heroic surgery way too early. Many musculoskeletal injuries that are surgical today were not surgical 5 years ago. I think we all know this. We are more inpatient today as a population than we were 5, 10, 15 years ago. The evidence for immediate repair is often much weaker than most orthopedic training would suggest. Meniscus tears, most rotator cuff tears, a lot of low grade ligament sprains. The outcomes for structured rehab are often equivalent to surgery, sometimes even better. So don't always jump to surgery. And I think many people have this image of like, once I get this surgery, my problem's going to be fixed. And we all know, I'm sure a lot of you listening that are in your 40s and 50s know that once you've had surgery, it's an uphill battle. It's not like you magically have this new joint or tendon or things are fixed. It's an uphill battle.
I mean, I'm probably living proof of this. I had rotator cuff injuries in both my shoulders. The plan was, so the orthopedist was a friend of mine, and he's like, well, fix your right one first because it hurts worst. I had surgery on the right one. When you have surgery, right, and you have to go through physical therapy, they make you do exercises with both of your arms. And the pain in my left arm, which was not the one I had surgery on, went basically completely away with the physical therapy I was doing. It was so remarkable because the plan was that 1 year after I had my right arm fixed, I would have my left arm fixed. And that was 5 years ago now, and I've not needed anything on my left arm because the physical therapy worked, and I keep up with some of those exercises, and it's worked miracles.
But it's homework, and people don't want homework. They want a quick fix.
Yeah, it literally took 6 months of homework, but now I'm good. All right, the next one, random peptides and supplements marketed for tendon healing everything. The big culprits, BPC 157, TB 500, fancy collagen peptides, powders with proprietary blends. The data in humans, like best case scenario, is thin. There are so many people who anecdotally will give evidence that, oh, this worked for me. What they're not telling you is that they were already also doing rehab of some sort. They were already following some sort of PT program. Time also does tend to make things less painful, right? So none of these things have really great evidence and should be met with skepticism.
tendon rehab has so much more evidence behind it than any peptide. So you should pick the intervention with real literature behind it. And this is not the moment to become a beta tester guinea pig for some injectable that comes from China. All right, let's move to the next one. Long-term opioid use for chronic musculoskeletal pain. And Vikas, I want you to take this one because you have seen opioid overuse more than anyone.
I'd say, I mean, and my colleagues in the ER
Yeah.
probably. So, we watch this tragedy play out all the time in the ER, especially over the last decade, right? A patient with a chronic back pain injury, a bad shoulder, bad knees. Pain started off as an acute issue that got treated with opiates. The patient never gets off of them, and now a decade later, then the ER at 2 a.m. in the worst pain, and they're basically screaming for more pain medicine because the 30 milligrams of morphine that they take already isn't enough because now they have an acute injury on top of their old chronic injury, right? They've become so dependent on pain medicine that they don't know how to deal with acute pain without more pain medicine. So opiates for a broken bone or post-op recovery, pretty genuinely useful, I'd say. But they should be used for days, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks at most. That's really what they're designed for. But for chronic musculoskeletal pain, a bad tendon, nagging shoulder pain, chronic arthritis, long-term opiate use is super detrimental. And I'm not saying that as like some sort of like moral judgment. I say it as a physiologic one. This is what really happens, right? Opiates, they don't just quiet pain, they rewire the brain in the long run. They downregulate your own body's natural pain modulating system. That is what endorphins are. And those are the endogenous opiate receptors in our body. So after literally about 4 to 6 weeks of being on an opiate, you have now downregulated your own natural endorphins and your pain threshold is now worse. So now you feel more pain to the same stimulus that the rest of us who've never been on opiates would ever experience. So that basically drives you to take more pain medicine, and that further downregulates the system. It's this like swirling toilet bowl, basically. It's a downward spiral, and it's biologically impossible to argue with. And I say this like having lived through really kind of the front lines of the opiate crisis in this country through the 2000s, 2010s, watching the pharmaceutical industry tell physicians that these drugs were safe for chronic pain. We started prescribing them accordingly. And then we watched generations of patients, most of them starting with like legitimate musculoskeletal injuries. And then they end up dependent on these, addicted, and then unfortunately for so many of them, dead, right? So 600,000 Americans have died from opiate overdoses and counting.
Yep. And the tragedy is these patients did nothing wrong. They, at the time, were just following medical advice that was, in retrospect, catastrophically incorrect.
I think they followed the advice that they were given, and a lot of times that advice was not entirely correct. If you're listening to this and you have a chronic musculoskeletal problem that's being managed with opiates, please have a real conversation with the physician who actually has time to really walk you through some of the alternatives. There are almost always better options, but they require work, right? So they require you to have some level of increased discomfort while you institute the proper progressive loading that a physical therapy program would give you, potentially targeted injections, anti-inflammatories. There has to be some modification that is going to remodulate your pain centers to start working with pain correctly. So that progressive loading, sleeping well, weight optimization, every single one of these things is a better long-term option than the opiate pill that seems like it's working right now, but then honestly is not a few weeks down the line, creating two problems: your original chronic pain and now the opiate downregulation of your own innate opiate system, which we all have.
All right, let's move on to the next myth, playing through it. The opposite mistake from complete rest and equally common. And I don't want to name any names, but I'm pointing to you. The mistake looks a lot like a certain doctor who played tennis after a 9-mile run with plantar fasciitis, who self injected with steroids.
I don't know what you're talking about.
That was a direct blow. Push through the discomfort, but don't push through the injury. There's a difference, and every over 40 athlete knows the difference in their gut. The problem is we don't listen to our gut, because listening to our gut means slowing down, and we don't want to do that until we feel that pop.
Right. So rest is not the answer, but in my case, denial is also not the answer. The answer is somewhere in the middle, and it's called being an adult about your body.
All right. So let's go through really quickly when to actually see a specialist. Quick and clinical, some red flags. Why don't you go through them?
Pain that wakes you up at night, you got to see the doctor. Loss of function that isn't improving after 2 or 3 weeks of modified activity. Any suspicion of a full tear, right? You hear an audible pop, you're getting numbness, tingling, weakness. That's signs of nerve involvement, and that really changes the math. Fever, redness, warmth in a joint. That's concern for an infection, not just inflammation. Any joint that just unexpectedly gives out, and any injury at all in someone with osteoporosis, diabetes, or history of prior fractures.
All right. And let's go through who to see and in what order, because this matters. Most people default to the ER, which is often the worst choice, right? We now know like ER waiting rooms, no offense. It's like you guys are the dumping ground, but wait times are 10 hours. It's awful. And you often don't get the care you need for an injured joint. So the right sequence for chronic musculoskeletal pain is usually primary care first, then an orthopedist if imaging is needed, and a physical therapist alongside both. So please see your primary. They're very well versed in orthopedic injuries. A good PT is a single highest leverage professional in an injury recovery, and most people wait way too long to make that call.
Exactly right, Nish. Let me just correct a little bit about what you said. We're talking about chronic pain that
Correct.
is exacerbated over time. This is not I fell off a ladder and now
Correct.
my leg is bent in the wrong direction. Like, yes, please come see me because that's what I do for a living. The chronic pain that I get patients all the time that are like, oh yeah, my shoulder's been bothering me for 2 months. And now this week, like it's waking me up at night. I'm not going to fix that in the emergency room. I'm going to say, oh, that sounds very much like a rotator cuff injury, and you need to go see the orthopedist or your primary care doctor. You may need an MRI. Patients are surprised to hear that they can't get an MRI in the emergency room. That's not what we do. An MRI is an hour-long test, and there's a screening process for the MRI. Like that's not what we do in the emergency room. If it's not right after, if your injury is not right after 2 or 3 weeks of doing everything correctly, you got to get eyes on it. But most of what walks into the ER on a Saturday night really could have been managed at home if the person had known what to do on a Monday morning.
Yep. All right. So quick elevator pitch. Why don't you take it?
Injury is inevitable after 40. And the injuries that sideline the over 40 weekend warrior are almost always tendon and connective tissue, plantar fascia, Achilles, rotator cuff, tennis elbow, patellar tendonitis. The healing is very slow. Complete rest is often the wrong long-term answer. Motion is medicine. Protein, sleep, strengthening the muscles that support the injured connective tissue. That is the actual playbook.
Yeah. The injury is not the problem. The reaction to the injury is the problem.
Well, I mean, the injury is the problem.
Yeah. Among other things. I've got 99 problems right now, and biceps tendonitis is not one.
Good for you.
I'm so happy with my tendon rehab.
Jay-Z reference.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the evolutionary closer. Injury has been a part of our human story since the beginning. Every one of our ancestors got hurt and they healed, often very well, because they kept moving. They ate whole foods. They slept when it got dark out, and their environment cooperated with the way their body was actually designed to repair itself. Your job in a modern world really is to recreate much of that environment, as much of it as you can while you are recovering. So that means progressively load the tissue, feed the tissue, sleep the tissue, trust its design. If you're playing the long game, you're going to get hurt. The people who come back stronger are the ones who keep moving, they keep eating protein, they sleep 8 hours, they build the joint support system while they have the time to do it.
Yep. Thank you guys for listening to another episode of MD Longevity Lab, playing the long game. If this episode was useful, share it with a friend who is currently on the couch icing something. I think we all have a friend that's been injured. So, and if you like this episode, please leave us a review.
And if you want help applying the long game to your own life, get foundational testing, sit down with a physician for 3 whole hours, and build a real plan, get VO2 max testing, all of that, please let us know. Please contact us at mdlongevitylab.com. Please visit us, Substack, right?
Yeah.
Instagram.
You've got a book coming out.
Have a book coming out. Please leave us a review. Let us know if you have topics that you want us to cover, because it gives us some guidance on what you guys want.
Yep. All right. Stay strong, guys, and keep playing the long game. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for playing the long game with MD Longevity Lab. You can visit us at www.mdlongevitylab.com to learn more about how we can support you on your journey. Stay connected with us on social media at MD Longevity Lab for tips, updates, and behind-the-scenes insights. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you subscribed, left us a rating, or shared it with someone you know who's also playing the long game. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.